You're listening to Life of the Record, classic albums told by the people who made them. My name is Dan Nordheim. Bright Eyes formed in Omaha, Nebraska in 1995 by Conor Oberst. Conor was in another band at the time called Commander Venus and had been writing and recording songs since the age of 14. The first Bright Eyes album was a collection of his songs from a 2-year period and was released on Saddle Creek Records, a label founded by Conor's brother Justin Oberst and Mike Mogis. Also in 1998, the album Letting Off the Happiness was released, which featured Mike Mogis for the first time. The next Bright Eyes album, Fevers and Mirrors, was released in 2000, with Lifted following in 2002. At that point, Conor moved to New York City and wrote enough songs to make up his next 2 albums, which he recorded back in Nebraska with Mike Mogis. I'm Wide Awake It's Morning, along with Digital Ash and A Digital Urn, were eventually released on the same day in 2005. In this episode, for the 20th anniversary, Conor Oberst and Mike Mogis reflect on how the Wide Awake album came together. This is the making of I'm Wide Awake It's Morning.
Hi, this is Conor Oberst from Bright Eyes, and I am discussing our album, I'm Wide Awake It's Morning. I think I was in the perfect stage of life where I had enough sort of experiences at that point that I felt like I had something to write about and to share. But I wasn't as, I guess I wasn't as jaded maybe, and I had a little bit of some wide-eyed innocence left. Now it's completely been beaten out of me, so don't look for it. But it was there at one time, and I think that record reflects just that period of my life, which it was romantic. I had already done a lot of things musically, I suppose, but it did feel like a fresh start. Like, I'd never lived anywhere besides Omaha, so really like calling another city home, and especially New York, it's still the greatest city. And it's like that really, I guess, caught me at the right time where I was able to express the newness of being there. Yeah, so the Wide Awake is definitely a record that I think it's a New York record, but it's sort of through the lens of a Midwestern transplant.
So there was this woman, and she was on an airplane, and she was flying to meet her fiance, sailing high above the largest ocean on planet Earth, and she was seated next to this man who, she had tried to start conversations, and the only thing she'd heard him say was just to order his Bloody Mary. And when she was sitting there and she was reading this really arduous magazine article about a third world country that she couldn't even pronounce the name of, and she's feeling very bored and very despondent, and then suddenly there was this huge mechanical failure, and one of the engines gave out, and they started just falling in 30,000 feet.
So we put out Lifted in 2002, and that was sort of us transitioning into what I would call a more professional state of being a band. Up until then it was all, touring in vans, and well, we got a booking agent eventually, but in the old days, kind of booking our own shows and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And after Lifted, it was like, have a sound person and have a tour manager and be on a bus. So that was sort of the beginning of the rest of my life, kind of. And then the next Wide Awake was the next record we made. And I remember it was New Year's Day, 2003. I like got in my van with a few of my friends in Omaha and my meager possessions and drove to New York City and parked my van in Jersey. And I started living with my manager at the time, like First Avenue and 13th Street. And then over the years, I lived in like 5 different apartments in New York, but always kind of in the East Village, Lower East Side zone. And yeah, I guess the record is sort of coming from I guess a place of being fresh off the boat, as you were, from the kid from the Midwest, I guess, taking it all in.
Hi there. My name is Mike Mogis, a member of the band Bright Eyes, and we're talking about "I'm Wide Awake This Morning," a record we put out a couple of decades ago. Conor's writing, the new setting and like just life situation around him absolutely, in my opinion, affected the writing of this batch of songs. There was just so much material that he was kind of coming through. I didn't notice any difference because he's always been just cranking out songs. Even when I met him as a 14-year-old, his songs, they were still clever and weirdly poetic, his solo records when he was a little kid, And I was like, dang, this kid's got some skills. What, he's only 13 years old? What the fuck? And he still hadn't went through puberty. He was still cranking out good songs then. So it was just kind of a moment like him probably growing up, moving to a new city, a metro, like the biggest city in America, and like finding new, making new friends, new connections, new setting. It just really kind of blossomed into this creative burst. He's always been sort of a sponge sucking in life, and putting it through his brain and then putting it into song when he was a teenager, making cassette tapes in his bedroom, by himself. And then here making this record after years of touring, and he's just still doing the same thing, absorbing all this stuff and putting his take on it and then putting a catchy melody behind it. I'm always impressed by him. And when he shows me a new song, I'm like, dang, that's so sad or something. I don't know. He's always done that,
I think all the Bright Eyes albums have their own, I guess, not necessarily concept records, but we've always kind of wanted our records to sound different than each other. I think that my voice and the songwriting is kind of the through line, but as far as like how we decorate the songs and approach the records, they're kind of been different all over the years. But for this record, we're going for, I guess, a purist, like 70s folk approach, very heavily influenced by like Jackson Browne and Joni Mitchell and Graham Parsons, and trying to think of stuff I was really into at the time, like Townes Van Zandt. Yeah, so I think that it's kind of funny, or it's been a thing over the years, because I think that Wide Awake was, definitely our biggest like commercial success, and I think that some people have kind of only heard that, and so they assume that our band was the entirety of what we did, kind of whatever you want to call it. I don't know, alternative country or some shit, because we had like a pedal steel. People aren't that discerning, I think, about differences sometimes with the genre, but that's just sort of, I mean, it's still a part of our band, don't get me wrong, but that record in particular, we kind of wanted to exist in a world that could be, I guess it's sort of retro in that sense. We recorded it on tape and all of that kind of old school approach.
It was one of the more fun and quick and easy records that we've ever made. And, I listened to it last night and I got teary-eyed, I got a little misty, and just because of memories of our friends and most of which are with us, some of which aren't, and that played on it. And like every time we make a record, it sort of encapsulates a certain period of time in life. For me, that was one of the first records that we had made where I felt like I didn't really do enough work or something. Like I was like, felt like kind of, did I try hard enough on this one? Like I felt like I could have done more. But the reason I didn't is because when listening, working on this batch of songs, 'cause we were doing two things at once. We were doing the Digital Ash and a Digital Urn record, as well as Wide Awake It's Morning, recording them simultaneously. We focused on this batch of songs first, even though we were tracking them at the same time, just due to some specific just efficiency things. This batch of songs just didn't require much. They didn't require any production. They were so personal, and the stories themselves were like so touching, and like there's just any other sounds were just superfluous and like I don't know. I felt a little insecure about it at first because I was like, shit, it doesn't have a bunch of fun, weird little tones, and I don't know. That we've been accustomed to adding to our music, Lifted had a bunch of people playing on it, and same Fevers and Mirrors had a lot of weird little production tricks, because that's when I learned how to use Pro Tools, and Letting Off the Happiness was recorded on DA-88s and like these weird digital tapes, and also on reel-to-reel 8-track machine. Limiting, but also you could add a lot of stuff. And with this, it was the tape machine back there in the control room, and most of it was live.
We had been playing a lot of the songs on the road prior to the recording. We didn't really labor over a lot of the arrangements like we have on other records. There's not a big, there's not at all like an orchestral element, which is on a lot of our records, or like the effects. And, Mike Mogis, who's one of the other guys in the band and a producer by trade, I always think of what he does and what he does with the effects in the studio, I guess, wizardry that he has at his disposal is very evident on a lot of our other records, but we kind of intentionally kept that away from this record so that it would have that, that pure old sound.
Conor, this was a very prolific time in his life where he came in with like 20 some songs. And we kind of picked out which ones would be for the folk record, which one would be for the digital record, like the Digital Ash and the Digital Urn album. And the ones that we chose to feature on Wide Awake It's Morning, we just really adhered to that aesthetic of simplicity and just straightforward and sincerity and no kind of tricks, because as Bright Eyes, we kind of like tricks. And restraint isn't necessarily one of our strong suits, we're kind of a lot of information, and it was so minimal. So everything that we did was very important and, intentional. Everything that you do in a studio you'd think is intentional, but there's a lot of unintentional things you do in the studio. In our past records and our current records, they're like, oh, that's a fun accident. With this one, there wasn't really that many fun accidents. It was about songs and the most kind of sincere way to present them. And so therefore it just meant minimalism to me. And it's the first time we'd ever done that, and it was such a nice change.
I think that, simplicity was on our minds, and we actually recorded the whole record in like 2 weeks or something like that, which for our band is record time. We spend, a lot of times we spend sometimes they spend years making a record, but, definitely like 6 months and, whatever. So this was like very much like we just did it. We did it as live as possible. And yeah, I think you kind of hear that on the recording. 2 of my friends from New York, Jesse Harris, who's a great songwriter, guitar player. He's probably best known he wrote a lot of like Norah Jones's big hits, like her huge hit. And he's just a friend from New York. And this guy, Tim Lunswell, R.I.P., who's an amazing bass player. And they kind of, they were in that, I don't know what it was, like Living Room was a club in like Lower East Side. This kind of this whole sort of folky jazz scene in New York. So the three of us took a very small plane because at the time, that's all you could get like direct from New York. And it was winter time. And I was scared of flying at that time. And it was shaky. I did have a brief big bopper moment. I was like, man, this might be it, you know? But alas, I made it.
The pilot's on the microphone, and he's saying, I'm sorry, oh my God, I'm sorry, I'm apologizing, and she looks at the man, and she says, where are we going? And he looks at her, and he says, we're going to a party. It's a birthday party. It's your birthday party. Happy birthday, darling. We love you very, 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 very much. And then he starts humming this little tune, and it kind of goes like this. It's kind of 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
I mean, this one, even Wide Awake, it has a weird little intro. You know, all of our records have an annoying intro just to test the listener's patience, I suppose. But even that was done live. Like Conor's telling a story about being on a plane, in a plane wreck, you know, like being on an airplane that's going down, you know. I think in a way it's a comforting story. It's like, we're going to a birthday party. It's your birthday. I love you very, very much. You know, like it's such a strange thing. Every time we did a take, we did like 3 takes of that song. And he told a slightly different story because he's improvising. You know, the story was kind of frameworked around the same premise of a crashing plane, but it was different each time, you know? So that nature kind of shows like there was no manipulation to it. It was just whatever came out, came out.
What you're hearing is like a live take of Tim and Jesse and I in the studio. We did record that song right when we got there. And all of our records are, for those who haven't listened to Bright Eyes records, there's always kind of a sound collage, some kind of intro before the first song that we always thought of as kind of this way to weed out casual listeners. You know, if you have enough attention span to sit through whatever strange thing we're doing at the beginning of the record, then, you know, you're maybe in a more mindset to receive the rest of the information of the album. So for that record, partly because it was, you know, we were steering clear of a lot of the effect-driven recordings. It made the most sense to do the intro of me just telling a story as if we were, you know, at a coffee shop playing a set or whatever. So
I remember a tiny bit of anxiousness, and maybe that anxiety came from this weird turbulent landing, or like this plane trip just to come out here to make the record, you know. And it's funny that would be the first things that people would hear on this album, you know. But I do think, you know, for me, don't think it's possible that I had met Jesse and Tim in passing in New York City, but it was definitely my first time recording them. And I still get nervous when setting up a session. I get a little, like, have this nervous energy and excitement, and which could also be construed as anxiety a bit, but like have this kind of energy when you're setting up and making a record, when a band just shows up. And it was the first time I was recording those guys. You know, I've been working with Conor for years and years and years. Like, so any of their nervous or frazzled nature just sort of probably matched mine. But it was exciting, and those dudes are just such pros. It was kind of effortless to like record a lot of the basic tracks for this record. So much so I felt like I wasn't, like I said, doing my job. Like, wow, we only did a couple of takes of this, time to move on. Like, you know, sometimes we hem and haw over things. This record we did not.
We must talk in every telephone, get eaten off the web. Must rip out all the epilogues from the books that we have read. Into the face of every criminal, strapped firmly to a chair. We must stare, we must stare, we must stare. We must take all of the medicines, too expensive now to sell. Set fire to the preacher who is promising us hell. Into the ear of every anarchist that sleeps but doesn't dream. We must sing, we must sing, we must sing. It'll go like this, alright.
When I wrote At the Bottom of Everything, I guess I had moved out of the first apartment in New York, and I was down on Avenue B at the time, and I remember just that feeling of being in New York. One of the things I really liked about it was, I mean, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, and maybe like at the time, kind of like a big fish in a small pond situation. And just growing up, I mean, it's just, Omaha's a city, it's a real city, but it's, you know, it's not a large city. So I kind of knew everyone there, and the people I didn't know knew me. So going to New York and the anonymity that provided, and I loved like walking out of my door, my apartment, and, you know, hearing 10 different languages being spoke on the street as I like walked around. And yeah, just kind of intoxicated by New York. And that song, I think, you know, was definitely inspired by walking around and just kind of looking at life, I suppose.
Those people that he met in New York City were very influential on how this record turned out sounding, you know, like the guitar parts of Jesse's and the bass parts of Tim's, and having Jesse and Tim there as part of our live crew for majority of the record. And the song At the Bottom of Everything, that one, Jim James did an overdub. He recorded that in Louisville at his studio in Louisville and sent that to us.
Jim James and I go way back. We were both on this record label called Wichita in England. It was the first label that signed My Morning Jacket and Bright Eyes for like a deal overseas. And so I met him real early on, became friends, and yeah, started playing shows together. I fell in love with his music, and, you know, he's just got such an incredible, unique voice. And I knew I wanted, you know, a high male harmony kind of, you know, Graham Nash kind of vibe or something like that in that ilk. And yeah, he came in and knocked it out of the park.
While my mother waters plants, my father loads his gun. He says death will give us back to God, just like the setting sun is return to the lonesome ocean. Splashed into the deep blue sea.
They were all in like a half circle, like just in a room in Lincoln at the studio. And so that one, I played mandolin like right after we recorded it. I tried to make it as live as I could, but after we recorded it, got the take. Like I said, I think we did like 3 passes of that song. And the last one, we were like, okay, that's it. And then on that song, there's times where there's one time, I think it's the last chorus of At the Bottom of Everything. Tim doesn't hit the right, went to the wrong note, the boom, boom, boom. Then he just does a walking thing, but we kept it. It just was charming, you know? It's like even when we didn't play it right, it was still charming. And yeah, there's some mistakes, and it sounds cool to us.
And then we'll get down there, way down to the very bottom of everything, and then we'll see it. Oh, we'll see it, we'll see it, we'll see it. Oh, my morning's coming back. The whole world's waking up. All the city buses swimming past. I'm happy just because I found out I am really no one.
I remember having a specific setup for that. And then, yeah, those were the first ones that we recorded. And yeah, First Day of My Life, Lua, At the Bottom of Everything, the one where Emmylou's One Foot in Front of the Other, Landlocked Blues. that was about it, I think, in that like setup where they're just in a half circle, and that kind of set a tone for the record, you know. And we did double drums on this album, so we had a setup for that. We had Clark and Bozell playing, I believe. Clark Beckley from The Faint and Jason Bozell from Rilo Kiley were the drummers on Wide Awake, and it might have been Matt McGinn playing bass on some of the double drum songs. He's a bass player in a band called Cursive. Nick White was the keyboard player, the piano player. He was in a band called Tilly and the Wall at the time. Maria Taylor also sang. Yeah, it was kind of a mixture of old school Nebraska, fucking Saddle Creek people, and New York folks that played on these records. But yeah, it started with the core acoustic songs, I believe, and in the most minimal way that we had recorded, which is live, everybody together, sitting right next to each other. And that kind of set a tone for how the rest of the songs would kind of unfold, I think. So it really felt like a lot of just friends making music together.
If you hate the taste of wine, why do you drink it till you're blind? And if you swear that there's no truth, and who cares, how come you say it like you're right?
I did demos prior to the record. Jesse Harris and I did some in New York, just in a really small studio, like up in the Sony building, because that was like my publisher at the time. And they had like a little free demo studio you could use. And then I also demoed in my house in Omaha, and my friend Jason Bozell, who he's been in a million bands and played with us, but he was in Rilo Kiley, that band from LA that we became friends with and ended up kind of joining our gang of Saddle Creek records and things. But anyway, it was one of the first times I really played with Jason as far as like arranging a song. And when I played out doing, you know, like the little waltz guitar thing, I think I had a inclination to play it really slow. So I remember like when he got in there and started doing a little more upbeat drum part, I think it like turned into a different thing. And that I, you know, because I can hear the old version that's probably half a copy of it that's like a lot sort of more maudlin and slow. And he put a little pep in the step. So like,
the first time I heard it, I remember thinking, dang, this one's long. Like, there's a lot of verses. It was such a trippy story. And I remember thinking, how do we make this waltz sound not like a waltz or something? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the song itself, like the title itself, We Are Nowhere and It's Now, is compelling to me. It was just moving to me to have that imagery. And that was one of the first things that I thought. But I did think, man, these verses are kind of long. They keep going. What are we going to do?
In our wheels that roll around as we move over the ground. And all day it seems we've been in between a past and future town. We are nowhere and it's now. We are nowhere, and it's now.
Conor and I flew to Nashville to record with Emmylou Harris, you know, there. And that was a trip because she's Emmylou Harris. She didn't even know, I mean, I think, was it her daughter or granddaughter? One of her, like, relatives that were, like, our age liked Bright Eyes. And so she took the job. She's like, okay.
well, that was very much a shot in the dark. Like I said, we were making that kind of record, and there was parts where we wanted harmonies and, you know, just kind of thinking about, you know, who would make sense with the songs we had. And, you know, obviously she's kind of the queen of that style of harmony and music. And, you know, we're big fans. So yeah, I just reached out to her via whatever connection management stuff or something. Somehow we got the versions of the recordings to her, and she agreed. So it was amazing. So I flew down to Nashville and we recorded her. I can't remember what studio. You guys have so many beautiful studios down there, but it was one of the old school ones that kind of had like a churchy quality to it. And I remember sitting down on the couch in the control room, and she had the recordings before, and she's like, "Oh, let me show you the harmonies I came up with." So I'm sitting on this little studio couch, and they're playing the track through the speakers, and then she starts singing next to me, and man, it was a pretty surreal, intense feeling, because it's like this voice I've heard, you know, my whole life more or less, and she's singing like my words and singing to my song. So that was very special. She's such a lovely person and very generous to do that for us.
We Are Nowhere and It's Now. I remember she was like, I don't quite get this song. Like she was like, I don't get, what is this about? And I don't even remember what Conor said. Like he said something kind of basic. Like, oh, okay. Like she's just a naturally gifted harmony singer. She's sung with everybody, like the most classic, best songwriters in the world. And she's a fucking classic songwriter herself. With an amazing voice. And like this one, because she never rehearsed. We walked in the studio. We had sent her the songs, and I know that she had listened to them and must have maybe hummed along with them in her car or her house or whatever. But we came in, hit record, and she's like, I can't quite find my harmony. We're like, what are you talking about? This sounds great. Like this was one song where when we were recording it, I remember her not as happy as she was with like Landlocked Blues and another Travelin song. That one was done within like the first take. So yeah, so I think it was because we had 3 songs. Generally speaking, we kind of like using or having an element at least be on an album 2, hopefully 3 times, just to make it feel cohesive. But with We Are Nowhere and It's Now, that one was a trickier one. And Conor, I remember wanting that one in particular. I think it is because it's so long and there's a lot of verses that just to have some shape to it, he really wanted her to sing a lot more on that one. It just felt like an important moment, and we just wanted to feature her voice.
I think she sings on like 3 songs, maybe. But yeah, we had recorded the record essentially, and she hadn't sent any of the harmony ideas, so everything kind of happened right there in the studio in Nashville, where she, like I said, she was sitting on the couch next to me and singing, and then like turning to me and being like, do you like, is that, you like that? I'm like, felt ridiculous even like answering the question. I was like, yeah, I mean, it's perfect, So yeah, it was just a real sweet dream to be there with her. Yeah, my friend Maria Taylor, who also sings on the record, and she played with us a lot back then. She was with me, and Mogis was down there. But I remember like at some point during that thing, like Maria had to like go in the hallway of the studio and was like crying, like overwhelmed by, how beautiful it was that she was like saying.
In like a 10-minute dream in the passenger seat while the world was flying by. I haven't been gone very long, but it feels like a lifetime. I've been sleeping so strange at night. Side effects they don't advertise.
I really love it when Nate's trumpet parts come in. It just sounds right to me. And we didn't really do much. There's piano comes in, or there's a little mandolin. There's also Emmylou Harris. We just chose very specific, small little arrangement choices to help the song move along, because there's a sense of motion in the song. We Are Nowhere and It's Now. It feels like kind of there's a lot of weird little not traveling aspects throughout this record. It would take the fucking first thing. You're in an airplane. There's a train underwater. There's another Travelin song. We Are Nowhere and It's Now. There's a lot of movement in this album. And so my thoughts when putting the song together was little things kind of popping in and out to create momentum. And then I guess you'd call it maybe second verse, but it's literally maybe the seventh verse, but where we drop things out, pare it down, and you kind of pause, it rests for a second. And just that creates its own motion where you rest for a second, where it's just kick drum and snare drum and Conor singing, and it's very soft guitar, but that song, it touched upon all kinds of personal things for me. It was not any really thing that we ever discussed, but about sleeping with a head full of pesticide and just the refrain of We Are Nowhere and It's Now, and the going to a bar after work, and not that either Conor or I had jobs, but like the idea of like friends in a place that's comfortable. And like, I don't know, there's just lots of touchstones of personal things that mean a lot to me. It's a well-constructed song.
It definitely is a encapsulation of that time in my life, like being fresh to New York. Yeah, it's still there, although it moved and it's a lot different now. But there's this bar, St. Dimphna's, that was kind of like my second living room, and spent a lot of time there. And they were this woman, Raquel, who was a waitress at the time. Eventually she went on to own it, which is great. But like, you order a drink and she would like bring like a bowl of soup first and be like, okay, you got to eat this before I can give you a drink. So that was, there was some discipline involved.
I've got no plans and too much time. I feel too restless to unwind. I'm always lost in thought as I walk a block to my favorite neon sign, where the waitress looks concerned, but she never says a word. Just turns the jukebox on and we hum along, and I smile back at her.
The title of the song is, to me, in my mind, touring. Like, there's that time in between cities when you really feels like you're nowhere. You're in between destinations, and still to this day, I feel like a sense of, I don't know, calm and, I don't know, freedom, and like sort of not invincibility, but just like existing on a different, like when you're traveling and you're in between those spots, like it doesn't matter if people call you or try to get a hold of you. Like, especially back then, it's like you couldn't, you just say I was on the road or whatever. And that's a good enough answer, so you're kind of, there's no obligations and you're just there and the interstate's blowing by. And I've always loved that feeling. So I guess that's where the title of the song comes from.
Did you forget that yellow bird? Oh, how could you forget your yellow bird? And she took a small silver wreath and pinned it onto me. She said, this one will bring you love. And I don't know if it's true, but I keep it for good luck.
I think that probably the most obvious political touchstone, or one of them on the record, is the Old Soul song for the New World Order. That song is definitely, parts of it are pulled right out of real life. There was a big protest in New York City leading up to the Iraq War. And yeah, my friends and I went out and, protesting, and that time, I mean, I think my time of becoming interested in politics, I guess, goes back to the 2000 election. I was 20 years old, but I remember being in Europe on tour, and it was like, we don't have a president still? Like, what is this all about, you know? And then 9/11 happened, and then, of course, it was on everyone's mind.
Gray light, new day leaks through the window. An old soul song comes on the alarm clock radio. We walk the 40 blocks to the middle of the place we heard that everything would be. And there were barricades to keep us off the street, but the crowd kept pushing forward till they swallowed the police. Yeah, they went wild.
I don't know, I just felt like I needed to know more about what was happening in the world after 9/11, and then that kind of led right into moving to New York and the war and the second election of Bush the second time, which I did a thing called Vote for Change, a concert tour with Bruce Springsteen and R.E.M. leading up to the war. And yeah, it's funny to think back, like, you know, it's kind of hard to get waves of enthusiasm around John Kerry, but we sure tried. And it wasn't just us. There was like our leg of the tour was Springsteen and R.E.M. and us, but there was different. I think My Morning Jacket was out with like Pearl Jam and I don't know, Dave Matthews. There was a whole network of people that were all part of the same organization trying to get Kerry elected. And that was, one of my first real introduction to complete political disappointment, like really putting your heart and soul in is something that doesn't come to fruition. So like we all live and learn.
We left before the dust had time to settle, and all the broken glass swept off the avenue. And all the way home held your camera like a Bible, just wishing so bad that it held some kind of truth. And I stood nervous next to you in the dark room. You dropped the paper in the water, and it all begins to bloom. Yeah, they go wild.
Collectively, we're all pretty pissed about the weird wars we're getting involved with for seemingly greed purposes. And like, I remember it was 2000. We were in Europe when all this recount between fucking Al Gore and George Bush were happening. We're like, what is happening? It took a month. And we were in Europe this whole time. We thought Al Gore would win. We're like, Jesus Christ. And then, 9/11 happened the next year. And like, then going to war in the Middle East. And after George Bush Sr. was in the Middle East in the 90s when I was in high school. Like, it was just felt like this weird tragic continuation of fucking oil, money, greed. I don't know. It just didn't sit well with any of us. And it just felt wrong and stupid and kind of evil and pointless and worth noting, I guess, and remarking on. And Conor did many times in the songs and in protests. And like, this is a true story about him and being in New York and doing these, because in Omaha, Nebraska, that shit, you didn't have big protests like that. Nowadays there actually are, but like back in the early 2000s, people weren't as engaged and as passionate. And I think that was a moving thing for Conor to feel this camaraderie for once, with tens of thousands of fucking other human beings having the same impassioned belief and being amazed by that. And holy shit, the power of the fucking people, like, coming together. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Like, like they're, it's reassuring and kind of, it gives you some kind of like joy or pride to have that affirmation in your fellow human beings that you're not alone. And like, you really do feel like there's a lot of power when people come together in protest and just come to the streets and like proclaim a certain thing in unity. It feels empowering.
Yeah, they go wild. Yeah, they go wild. Yeah, they go wild.
The pedal steel is obviously a big part of our band, but I think the part on that has a very bittersweet sound to it, which I appreciate. Still to this day, that little drum break thing that happens towards the end of the song before the kind of big outro. I remember when that, I think it was Clark Beckley's old friend, plays in the faint. I don't know, that happened because that was another song we played live a lot before recording the album. So I always liked that part, the drum break into the big chords and the outro. Very cathartic, I suppose.
I think it might have been one of the first songs that Conor showed me. I think it was at the Bowery Ballroom. He showed me this song, and we played it. I think it was just him and me. I was just on like banjo or mandolin or something. I can't remember if it was Monsters of Folk, Bright Eyes and Friends. But I remember he's showing it to me in the dressing room at Bowery Ballroom. Yeah, it was this song. It was that song. And I remember him saying, I picture like this big moments, especially in the weird little pause. And so it wasn't until like months later that we actually got to the studio to record it. But that was one because of what he said in the dressing room. Like I was like, well, let's use this one for like two drummers, just because a lot of times that adds impact or like bigness or like the sound of a large group, even though we were a small group. And they went wild. We break it down there just for effect of like, I find that, I don't know, when you say something softly, it makes people listen more. I don't know. It was kind of always in Conor's, it was his idea to do that, obviously, but it was the dynamic like shifts in the song, I think, are important. In even the story of protests and an alarm clock radio, like just coming out of a slumber to being, like just shocked. And there's just little nuggets of imagery that I think piecing the song together and having employed of like whispery vocals that are real quiet, then all of a sudden getting really big with drum, dig it. Like, it sounded bigger to me than what it actually was, actually recorded, but unfortunately, like it still is effective. The sort of jarring shifts. It's a real kind of catchy, pleasant, like melody, and even though the song isn't that pleasant.
And just when I get so lonesome I can't speak, I see some flowers on a hillside, like a wall of new TVs. Yeah, they go wild. Yeah, they go wild. Yeah, they go wild. Yeah, they go wild. Yeah, they go wild.
At this point in his recording career, I mean, he'd made like a bunch of records. He's kind of good at working the microphone. This record I used, what, you're using an SM7 right there? That's the microphone that I used with him on making this record. And in a lot of records, especially when it's him playing acoustic guitar, because it rejects it has a lot of proximity effect. When you're up on it, it's got a lot of closeness, and you back off of it, you kind of disappear, And so, and he knows, he has himself so loud in his headphones. I go to his headphones, I'm like, damn, how can you hear anybody else in the band? But he can't. But so he's really aware of like where his vocals are sitting in the mix. So he's pretty good at just like moving back and forth and using that mic in particular, the SM7, which does have a lot of proximity effect and a lot of rejection from outside sources, which is why it's handy to use in a live situation than an acoustic guitar player. Is a singer-songwriter, I should say. And yeah, he gets right up on it and just whispers, and he's like shoving his mouth on top of the little foam part right there when he's whispering. And then when he starts shouting, he moves a couple inches off, and it just sounds about right. Lua just felt like it's just so touching because he sings it so softly and it's so pretty.
I know that it is freezing, but I think we have to walk. I keep waving at the taxis, they keep turning their lights off. But Julie knows a party at some actor's West Side loft. Supplies are endless in the evening, by the morning they'll be gone.
Lua has been a song that I've continued to play, kind of never stopped. I wouldn't say it's certainly not every show I play, but I've played it a lot more than many of my other songs. I remember writing that, and sometimes I had another good friend in New York, this guy Butch, who he was like one of the only people I knew that got up early in the morning because he was like a photographer assistant. So he was always going to these shoots like mad early. And sometimes I would like turn up at his apartment because I'd been up all night or I couldn't sleep. So I remember going and like playing that song for him. He's probably the first person to hear it actually. And he was like, he has a way of making you feel like, wow, that's like really good. So he boosted my confidence with that one, I guess.
Again, such a like weirdly beautiful and somewhat tragic, not tragic, but it's, I don't know. I always felt it was kind of sad, but I mean, it's just like a happy, catchy melody, but it's about being a drug addict and like fucking, I don't know, being alone.
When everything is lonely, I can be my own best friend. I get a coffee and the paper, have my own conversations with the sidewalk and the pigeons and my window reflection. Mask I polish in the evening, by the morning looks like shit.
Again, it just kind of trying to have that less is more attitude towards the record, because as you probably remember, we released 2 records on the same day. So Digital Ash and Digital Urn would come out the same day. We recorded it after we recorded Wide Awake, but I was already writing those songs and we were kind of already piecing that record together, which is totally different. And so, yeah, I think that the yin and yang of those, working on those kind of simultaneously led to like a lot of decisions on Wide Awake to just make it simple. So that song felt like nice just on its own.
The spareness in it and the kind of weird loneliness in it, you didn't want anything to ruin that effect, because it's kind of a thoughtful, introspective, lonely song. And there's only one person involved with that. It's you, or it's the author. It's just, so. And maybe that's why a lot of people like it, because it feels like it's not encumbered with stuff. Like it's, can be more touching and more personal because it can feel like they can put themselves in the song.
And I know you have a heavy heart, I can feel it when we kiss. So many men stronger than me have thrown their backs out trying to lift it. But me, I'm not a gamble. You can count on me to split the love I saw you in the evening, by the morning won't exist.
Yeah, again, that's, a little vignette of New York and, another friend of mine. God, it sucks the longer you live and you're like, oh yeah, that person's also dead, but she's no longer with us, unfortunately. So I don't know if I should be talking about it like that. But yeah, she's a old friend.
You're looking skinny like a model with your eyes all painted black. You just keep going to the bathroom, always say you'll be right back. Well, it takes one to know one, kid. I think you got it bad. But what's so easy in the evening, by the morning, such a drag.
We try and make as best a judgment as we can in the moment. And that one just felt like there should be nothing else here. Like, let's make the point about the human condition that like lives in all of us, its flaws, its beauty, and all that. It seemed to help embolden the point, I guess, of the song, or the message of the song, just to have it be just by himself, you know? And hopefully it takes the listener just to be by themselves too.
It's also kind of flexible as a duet. I've sang it with like Gillian Welch and Phoebe Bridgers and the Clara and Joanna, the girls from First Aid Kid, and different people over the years. And also added like sometimes Nate Walcott, who's the other main person in Bright Eyes, plays trumpet. And so sometimes we'll put a long trumpet solo in the middle. I don't know. We've played it like so many different ways over the years, and it kind of always works, I think, because it is simple and the lyrics are maybe not as, I don't know, dense or layered as some of my other songs. So maybe it's a little more, I think a lot of the songs on that record are a little more immediate to the listener, which is probably why more people listen to it than our other song. I don't know.
And just for the dynamic of an album, we always like try and find ebbs and flows to rein things in and make it, you know, more intimate and spare, you know, just to have shape to the album as a whole. So this just felt like the right song for that. There's obviously several songs that are spare, but this one is the most, you know, because it's a lonely little number, but it's also like extremely beautiful.
And I'm not sure what the trouble was that started all of this. The reasons all have run away, but the feeling never did. It's not something I would recommend, but it is one way to live. 'Cause what is simple in the moonlight by the morning never is.
It's a well-written song. It's like one of the best ones on the record. Well, I don't know. I like all of these songs. There's no favorite song of mine on this record, but yeah, they all resonate. I guess the time and place when this record was made, they all feel connected, and they all feel. Last night when I was listening to it, I felt like I was back in 2004 or something. Like I just felt, even though we play these songs live still, like I haven't listened to the record in a while, and you know, yeah, I got fucking teary-eyed just thinking about the time and the people. It's that all these songs kind of resonate with me as a collective, as a whole, and so therefore they're all very meaningful. Each record's kind of like that, though, to be honest. Even Digital Ash, even People's Key, you know, or Casdea, or more recent ones, you know.
You were born inside of a raindrop, and I watched you falling to your death. And the song, well, she could not save you. She'd fallen down too. Now the streets are wet.
God, I keep feel like I'm giving the same answer. But the songs were all written in the same time period, so I guess that makes sense. But yeah, you know, you get to New York, and one of the first challenges, I think, for newcomers is, just figuring out the subway system. And I was never very good at that. I remember it's like, I feel like I'm always getting lost or thinking I'm headed to the right place. And this is like, flip phone era times. So, you had to read the maps and things like that. So, yeah. But the L train was the one that was real easy for me because just take it from 14th Street in First Ave, one stop, and then you're like in Bedford and Williamsburg, which Williamsburg wasn't, I mean, it was still gentrifying and stuff, but it wasn't like a mall like it is now. It was like a place people went. So I could always make that little jump and then see my friends that live in Brooklyn. I'm just talking about transportation and stuff now. Suppose you want some like emotional, uh, the craziest one is, the one that you take from France to England, the tunnel. Like it's like, have you ever, this? It's like a giant train. It goes under the English Channel, and like literally, like you drive your tour bus onto it. You park on the train and like go under the English Channel. That's like the ultimate train underwater experience.
Body of water, toxic and timeless, Atlantic Ocean, New York skyline. I always get lost when I leave the village, so I couldn't come meet you in Brooklyn last night. But I sing glory from my lowest, and I will say peace to the people I meet.
It was a fun song to play with Jesse, and I played steel, and Jake, our friend, sang on it. It just felt breezy. There's a swing to the rhythm of it that has a little jazziness to it. And that's kind of the breezy, kind of carefree, like swing it has in it that is, unique.
I guess I never thought of it as jazzy, but I love jazz. I do love jazz. The harmonies are my friend Jake Bellows, who was in a band from Omaha called Neva De Nova that we played with and made like a split EP with. That's him singing, and he has a beautiful voice. I think Jesse Harris again was playing which that actually makes sense. He was playing electric guitar, and he, like I said, he was the one that wrote the Norah Jones songs and has tons of his own records. But yeah, there is a weird crossover, or at the time, this sort of jazz scene and folk scene in New York. Like I said, this place called the Living Room, and just all those little spots like in the Lower East Side. That group of people would play like, every week, and I ended up down there a lot.
So don't be fooled, no, don't get lied to. Love was always cruel, and don't act strange, don't be a stranger. It happened to me, now it's happening to you. But if you take that train underwater, then we could talk it through.
There's a romanticism to it that I find relatable, even though it's a story about something specific, but the metaphors in it kind of feel relatable to me. Yeah, but the song Train Underwater does always struck me as a romantic idea of like a new place, new beginnings, and a new relationship, whether it be with an environment or a person. It's just, I don't know. It felt kind of positive and hopeful.
The excitement of like anything is possible. You don't, when you go out in Omaha, we had tons of fun and things, and we did, I think, very creative things for like what we had. But being in New York, it was like yeah, those experiences, you're like, whoa, like you meet meet one of your heroes at a party, like, and like sees something amazing that I would never see in Nebraska. I think it added a lot to my desire to create.
And now I'm riding all over this island, looking for something to open my eyes. But I still sing glory from a high rise. And I will say thanks if you're pouring my drinks, while the world waits for an explosion, that moment in time when we'll be set free.
Again, it's sort of that contrast of that is in throughout this record, which is despair and joy. Like, First Day of My Life is probably the most positive song I think Conor's written, at least at that point. And well, there was some other ones. Going for the Gold, Kathy with a K. There's some songs that like you just espouse positivity. It's rare with Conor's writing, but like I really feel like that is the most positive song Conor's ever written. It's about the person that's going to be showing up to the studio any minute. I just got a text from Maria. She's in an Uber on the way here. I'm making a record with Maria Taylor. She sings on this record on many occasions. She's sung on a lot of our records in Bright Eyes. But it was just such a beautiful like love song.
This is the first day of my life. Swear I was born right in the doorway. I went out in the rain, suddenly everything changed. They're spreading blankets on the beach.
I wrote it, again, not thinking much about it. I was a little, it's very pure love song as far as the songs in my canon or whatever. And so I've always been a little like self-conscious of it, I guess. And at the time I was as well. I've written a lot of songs about love, but most of them drip with sarcasm or some shade of darkness. And this one is real straight to the point. I mean, it's just a love song. And I remember playing it at a show. It must have been in Omaha, real early on, one after I wrote it. And my friend Tim Casher, who's like the singer in Cursive and real old friend, whose music I trust a lot. And like, if you know anything about his music, it's also very cynical and like, similar. But he came up to me and was like, "Oh, was that new song?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "It's the best song you've ever written." I'm like, "Really?" I didn't think so.
Yours is the first face that I saw. I think I was blind before I met you. And I don't know where I am, I don't know where I've been, but I know where I want to go. And so I thought I'd let you know. Yeah, these things take forever, I especially am slow. But I realized that I need you, and I wondered if I could come home.
First Day was a song that's just really intimate and personal, whether it's the listener or the stories themselves in the song. It's just the only way to really present that song is to be intimate and personal, which is to just keep it spare. It has obviously the embellishments of upright bass and Jesse Harris playing acoustic guitar, but it's still real tight, and I think that's the importance in that song, is to have it feel tightly together. You know, that one is about a couple of people. It's about being together, you know, with somebody else. So having it be totally Conor by himself didn't feel right. So that's why there's like just, I mean, maybe they're having a threesome. I don't know. Like between Jesse and Conor. I'm kidding. Musically speaking, it was important to keep it really spare, but having something else there, you know, because that's what it's about.
It's like far and away the song that I've ever written that the most people have heard, which again is just, you know, you can't predict these things. I think like for all music, I feel like if you set out to make something to please an audience, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it's even that true with, I feel like it's even true with like straight up top 40 songs, that I think the ones that become really huge, and not saying my song was like this at all, but I think there's like a fluke quality to it. And it's like the zeitgeist of whatever at the time. Like I'm trying to think of like, what was the one, the Danger Mouse, Crazy. Like that's kind of like, why did that song become huge? I mean, it's a great song, but you know what I mean? Or like, even like Amy Winehouse or something, you know, there's something where it's like, there's a quality that's universal, but it also is not exactly something that's available at the time, you know? And then people usually start recreating, you know, facsimiles of whatever was successful. You know, I think that's just the nature of the music that is. But yeah, so I have no idea why that one is the, you know, I guess I do. I just said I did. I have an idea why, but I wasn't planning on it.
Remember the time you drove all night just to meet me in the morning? And I thought it was strange, you said everything changed. You felt as if you just woke up. And you said, this is the first day of my life. I'm glad I didn't die before I met you. But now I don't care, I could go anywhere with you, and I'd probably be happy.
I saw something maybe a decade ago, but somebody was doing stats on like the most played songs at a wedding. And number one was Jason Mraz, I'm Yours. And then number two was First Day of My Life by Bright Eyes. And I was like, because it's such a beautiful, like this is a feeling that every human being hopefully has. And it's so well articulated in the way that he relays these feelings and stories and events in a song that's catchy, you know, like it's kind of amazing and perfect. So no, I'm not surprised. I'm glad that it's like that, you know.
I've had so many people over the years come up and say that was our first dance, or you walked down the aisle to it, you know. And yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I sometimes feel, you know, not bad, but I guess a little bad that, I don't know, I feel like through our music, I put a lot of darkness into the atmosphere. And so maybe karmically that song can help balance the scales of all the other songs I've written. I don't know.
So if you wanna be with me, if these things there's no telling, we just have to wait and see. But I'd rather be working for a paycheck than waiting to win the lottery. Besides, maybe this time it's different. I mean, I really think you like me.
In live, we kind of is one that he does change some of the lyrics up a little bit, and we kind of reinvent it with flute solos or like a little mandolin or whatever. There's just other ways to embellish it, but it is about togetherness. And so that's why I think it's kind of fun to explore that, you know, First Day of My Life, because it is about being together and the love that you have. So that's why sometimes when we play it live, we kind of jam out with it, and we have everybody kind of jumping in and out, because it's kind of a celebration of sorts.
I have a thing with a lot of our records where I don't listen to the recordings very much unless I have to maybe relearn something for a tour or some occasion to listen. But I play the songs, I play the songs all the time. So the songs themselves like exist in my mind almost separate from the recording. So sometimes I'll hear an old recording and I'll be like, wow, that tempo is like way different than the way I play it now. Or I hear the sound of my voice and I'm like upset that I don't like how I sound, like things that are specific to the recordings. I mean, not just that record, but all older records. But the songs themselves exist in my mind and every time we play them. And I think that those songs stand up. I still play most of them live. We play a lot of them still, so that's a sign that we still like them,
Changing all my strings, I'm gonna write another traveling song.
There's so many songs with that train beat, there's, it's just the classic country rollicking. I love that word, rollicking. Only music journalists use that word. I'm gonna start trying to use it in regular life. Just be rollicking along today. But yeah, I think that it's effective on that song. It's like, I would say, maybe Johnny Cash inspired.
Another traveling song. It's kind of ruckusy. It's more, a lot of the musicians and the arrangements are kind of glued together in a weird frenetic blur of like ruckus sometimes. It is kind of ruckusy, rollicking train ride. Digga, 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 and it's kind of just a fun thing to play. So it's a fun song to play live still today. So it felt like a good mechanism to have that story be told to that kind of music,
And a dream about a train that's gonna take me back where I belong. Well, now the ocean speaks and spits and I can hear it from the interstate. And I'm screaming at my brother on his cell phone, he's far away. And I'm saying nothing in the past or future ever will feel like today. Until we're parking in an alley, just hoping that our shit is safe.
The name kind of says it all. There's been a million Travelin songs, and here's another one. It's kind of the idea. Like it's meant to exist in a continuum of that style of song that I think no one will ever stop writing. There's someone somewhere writing one today, like with the same intention. Trying to capture that feeling. And yeah, I think that traveling in general has been one of the few like touchstones of my life or whatever. I mean, it's just like most of my adult life I've been moving around. So that's it's kind of very natural song to write.
With another traveling song, it feels like moving through all these different scenes of life, from yelling at a brother to sitting in a room with a typewriter, or just like something about fast food crown and a weird creepy event about being a child. It's just kind of moving throughout life. It's kind of going all over the place. A lot of these things have some personal touchstones, to Conor or to us as a group of people that are in his family and friends, and it just kind of moves in a beautiful and like ruckusy way, and it takes you all over the place.
So I go back and forth forever. they come in pairs. I will, I won't, I doubt I don't. I'm not surprised, but I never feel quite prepared. Now I'm hunched over a typewriter. I guess you'd call that painting in a cave. And there's a word I can't remember and a feeling I cannot escape.
That's when he's alone, that's why we pull it back there, because he's like, isn't that the blank page sitting at a typewriter, those lyrics? Yeah, because it just felt like, okay, now you're by yourself, but you're still in this journey, you're still in this process, you're still in motion, even though you're at that point kind of alone. And that's why we kind of pare it back, but it gives shape to the song too, but it's fun to take Conor's lyrics and try and musically augment what the lyrics are saying, or like not augment, but to embolden like kind of the message, that happens in a lot of the Bright Eyes stuff, but it is kind of fun to pare it down because it kind of sets you up for, a bigger release.
There's like a defiance to that song, like sort of no matter how deranged the world seems or how down you might be on yourself or your creativity or your point, like why, all the sort of existential bullshit that I always write about. Like, I think that song is a defiant, I guess the last line, like, I'll fight like hell, to hide that I've given up, it's like, it's kind of a fucked up line actually, but, it's still like, the idea that like music and traveling and friends, like, can save you and they have a point, and that's, yeah, it's kind of a fight song, I guess.
Find my fears and face them, or I will cower like a dog. I will kick and scream or kneel and plead. I'll fight like hell to hide that I've given up.
Landlocked Blues, that one, yeah, when you walk away, I walk away, just tell me which road you'll take. Just the way the song starts, like it just feels spare and alone. Lyrically and emotively, like it feels like a personal like journey, and having it be spare is like an important aesthetic, I think. I'm really happy and proud about just how that one turned out.
If you walk away, I'll walk away. First tell me which road you will take. I don't wanna risk our paths crossing someday. So you walk that way, I'll walk this way. And the future hangs over our heads, and it moves with each current event, until it falls all around like a cold, steady rain, just staying when it's looking this way.
Well, that one's probably the oldest of those songs on Wide Awake that made the record. There's actually like a real early version of it that's on a Saddle Creek compilation. It's like different. I don't think maybe to that point had I ever like released a song for a second time, but I did feel like it fit with the other songs that were going to be on the record.
I do kind of remember this. Connor's like, I don't know, we've already released that. We've never done that before. Put out a song and then re-record it and then put it on our album. And we already had so many songs because we were doing digital. We had 20 some songs to work with, and we just tried it. And the way that they played, just the three of them together, just automatically sounded engaging and interesting. I think that's also one of the, I think I just liked the song so much that I think when we decided to record it, again, that was with Jesse Harris and Tim Lunsell. It was in like the live recordings of just the trio of them. It felt special and new just right off the bat. Like having Emmylou sing on it really kind of set it apart from the other version of the song as well. That just made it special.
And the moon's laying low in the sky, forcing everything metal to shine. And the sidewalk holds diamonds like a jewelry store case. They argue, walk this way, no, walk this way. And Laura's asleep in my bed. As I'm leaving, she wakes up and says, I dreamed you were carried away on the crest of a wave. Baby, don't go away, come here.
The version of it on Wide Awake It's Morning, I think, is the best serving version of that song. But like, again, the elements of adding Emmylou, she's kind of mixed pretty prominently on that song, as she should be, and Nate's trumpet parts, and then kind of a big, I think Nikki played like the piano, like just when things come in, they have impact. When Emmylou's voice comes in, it's really emotive to me. And I think that it's hard to, picture that song any other way, honestly. Even though we played it 3 different ways, evidently we've recorded it 3 different ways and released all 3. This is the version that feels the most true to the song.
Obviously, Emmylou sings all over that one, which I think, took it to a very different place than when it was just me singing. I mean, I remember being a little surprised just that she wanted to sing, like she was going to sing as much of it as she sang. Because I was I was expecting it to just be like certain parts or something, but I wasn't about to say anything to Emmylou, she was like, dude, she's singing on a record. So, and now after it happened and, now it seems like it always should have been there, but I was a little bit, pleasantly surprised that she was, going to sing as much as she did. Kind of really did turn it into like a duet kind of feel.
And there's kids playing guns in the street, and one's pointing his tree branch at me. And so I put my hands up, I say enough is enough. If you walk away, I'll walk away. And he shot me dead. I found a liquid cure from my landlocked blues. It will pass away like a slow parade. It's leaving, but I don't know how soon.
Omaha is very close to like the geographical center of the United States, so it takes a long time to get to the ocean, say that. So I'd been playing that song for a while. It seemed like for a while. Maybe I guess time was different then too. It's like what was like 2 years felt longer than 2 years now. Now 2 years just happened, Probably this interview is probably 2 years. We got to look at our calendars after this, but no, I think that song is still like, again, it's one that I play sometimes, and I guess there's a Dylan thing or Leonard Cohen, just, songs that kind of push the envelope with like how many verses you really need, or, it's a lot of words. I mean, I love Bob Dylan. I love all his records, even the ones I don't love, I still kind of love, I mean, he's always been just part of my life, all of our lives, and I think as any songwriter that cares about words, it's kind of impossible not to be somehow influenced or, informed by his music, because it's kind of omnipresent, and he's influenced so many people that it's just, he's part of the DNA of, American music, popular music, whatever. And yeah, I mean, the whole comparison thing, I never took that at all seriously, because no one should. And there's been bunch of people before me and a bunch of people after me. And, I think it's just music journalism shorthand for like guy with guitar that has a lot of words in their songs or something. You know what I mean? Like things that get compared to Dylan, I find not really that much like it at all. And then other times it is, but I'm a fan.
He always kind of not scoffed, but like I remember lots of folks brought that up in interviews, or you'd read it in kind of press things, and this is a time before social media and all that shit. So it was Rolling Stone or like bigger media outlets and so forth. And so he was like, well, I think there was a certain kind of flattery that you would get because obviously, like between like Bob Dylan or Leonard Cohen or like these are like, in my opinion, the two best songwriters that lived, and then for him to be kind of thrust into that like weird category of like, and he's like 22 years old, like it seemed like a lot, but he kind of shrugged it off, I think, like he was like, huh, boy, or whatever. Like there was all kinds of weird little things that people would say, and I don't think that affected his songwriting. I think he was very prolific at that point in his life. That's why he wrote so many songs. We put out 2 records on the same day.
In a way, it was sort of the kind of beginning of that era of my life. I guess like whatever the line is, being 22 or whatever. It's like I was 22 when I wrote that line. I try to change it like as the years went by, but some numbers don't flow as well. They don't sing as well, as they say.
And the world's got me dizzy again. You think after 22 years I'd be used to the spin, and it only feels worse when I stay in one place. So I'm always pacing around or walking away, and I keep drinking the ink from my pen, and I'm balancing history books up on my head, but it all boils down to one quotable phrase: if you love something, give it away.
I think there's the segment of my songs that if you're not interested in words or like the story of the song, there's not a lot there for you per se, like there's not a cool beat or, it's just a lot of words.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned that one on same with We Are Nowhere, where the verses just seem, right when you think there'll be a bridge or a pre-chorus or a change, it just kind of recycles a verse. I never thought that they were too long. All the lyrics are engaging, and they kind of tell, especially in We Are Nowhere and It's Now, just again, these different stories and places to where there are a lot of words are kind of necessary. There's a lot to explore there. And same with Landlocked Blues, where it just, kind of felt almost stream of consciousness there, like in the way it was sort of presented. I feel like little ornamental tweaks throughout that song just sort of help delineate some of the stanzas, just to make it feel like it kind of moves.
One thing I like about my songwriting style, I guess, which is, influenced by lots of different people, but I do like when songs are non-linear. I mean, I think a great old school like story song is amazing, but those are really hard to write, and sometimes they can go kind of into like schmaltzy, not good territory in my opinion. But songs that, each stanza or each verse, you kind of have a chance to introduce a new idea. And that is like a very like, I would say Dylan or Cohen thing to do. You have a lot of ideas, and there is, to me, they're all connected and they belong together. But as a listener, it might take a second to find that it's like some verses can feel like a non sequitur, or like the song's starting over. Here's a bunch of new things, But I like that, that's like, it's like, I think it's good for the mind, to think of not everything has to be like, ABC 1, 2, 3.
A good woman will pick you apart. A box full of suggestions for your possible heart. But you may be offended and you may be afraid. But don't walk away, don't walk away. We made love on the living room floor, with the noise in the background from a televised war. And in that deafening pleasure, I thought I heard someone say, if we walk away, they'll walk away.
Kids playing guns in the street and the versus making love on a living room floor, very different places, kids playing guns in the street and making love on the floor. And so I think we just naturally kind of felt compelled to have them musically present themselves slightly in a different way, in a different environment. Not a different environment because it's not that extreme, because that would be distracting, but like just kind of treat them as their own little thing. It all is cohesive. Obviously, Conor's playing acoustic guitar and singing, and that one was recorded live, with Jesse and Tim. Also having Emmylou come in was a mechanism to use as far as movement and change and color is concerned. And, whether it be the kind of, it's not a trumpety fanfare-y thing on Landlocked Blues, but just the tap solo and like Nate's parts on this just add a lot of impact.
And the whole world must watch the sad comic display. If you're still free, start running away, 'cause we're coming for you.
We sometimes insert musical references, or I don't know, they almost border on jokes, but they're not jokes. But yeah, obviously he's playing like taps, and there's the line before it, or the verse before it is, the verse about the war on television, and yeah, that is the kind of most, I suppose, political verse in there. And it was just cool I can't remember whose idea that was, if it was Nate or mine or whatever, but we did it once, and then we're like, that's perfect. We gotta record it that way.
It's just the impact of brass and what Nate, his parts and his kind of arrangements of the parts that he's playing are so thoughtful, and, it really elevates the track when he comes in. And it weirdly, even when it's taps in Landlocked Blues, it still adds a little bit of joy to me. I don't know, even if it's a mournful bum 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 bum, just at a military funeral, but like it still elevates it with a little bit of joy. The trumpet in this album kind of pulls that off too. It's mournful but also joyous.
Poison oak, some boyhood bravery. When a telephone was a tin can on a string.
Well, that one, on occasion, there's songs I write that, many times I wonder about how like certain actual people in my life are gonna like receive a song, but I don't know it's right or wrong sometimes, but I think just stay true to the writing process and the creative process. Like sometimes things get into songs that are maybe painful or whatever to certain people, and that song kind of falls into that category. For my family, it's my my mom's side of the family is very close. I have had two brothers, but I had all these first cousins. My mom had like 7 brothers and sisters, and they all lived in the same neighborhood. So really, like, it was like I grew up with this huge family. One of my cousins, like, took his own life when we were young, like when we were 21, I guess, or 20. But his brother, my cousin Ian, is like my best friend. We lived together while all that happened, and yeah. So I guess it's a tribute to his life, but sometimes I feel bad 'cause it's like a lot of the dark things about his life, and he was more than that, but it's just a little snapshot, I suppose.
Fell asleep with you still talking to me. You said you weren't afraid to die. In Polaroids, you were dressed in women's clothes. Were you made ashamed? Why'd you lock them in a drawer? Well, I don't think that I ever loved you more.
Also, like, kind of a deeply personal thing for Conor, like, that was a long time ago. It was kind of when I first started to get to know Conor, when that kind of event happened. And there's little bits of, like, little stories of past events, maybe not completely biographical or autobiographical, but pulling from life events and kind of shaping them in the song. And there's a sweetness and kind of sincerity in the song, about boyhood, being a child, like the telephone on a string and all these, like, childhood memories. It's just touching.
That was one that I did just by myself at that Sony studio. I do remember sending that demo to Mike Mogis, and he really was like, wow, this is like a special song. And then added that really exceptionally beautiful pedal steel to it.
It was one of the songs that we've also wanted this dynamic shift. I remember kind of wanting to add steel, just to make it weepy sounding or something. I don't know, like, sad. I feel like the pedal steel in Poison Oak kind of acts as a element to kind of just employ a little sadness, extra sadness to it or something. And so when putting it together, I think it was just kind of natural, because those feelings, I still feel them now. So they were easy to kind of tap into then when it was a new song, and kind of, and actually maybe it's an old soul song. Maybe it could have been Poison Oak. No, it's one of the two that Conor showed me first that we played live at the Bowery, but it might have been both. I have a memory of these two songs being kind of the earlier songs that he showed me that we kind of played before we recorded the album in a different fashion, like in a more minimal way. So when we came to record Poison Oak, it felt already kind of slightly familiar in a way. And also, like I said, it kind of, it appealed to me just immediately, just emotionally.
Then when you turned away, when you slammed the door, when you stole the car and drove towards Mexico, and you wrote bad checks just to fill your arm, I was young enough, I still believed in war.
There's like a lot of innocence and sweetness and kind of sincerity in the song, as well as a lot of dark components, and being able just to perform this material is a means of healing, and that had a lot of weight to it. When we recorded it for the album, it felt kind of heavy.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know when the decision with the drums, and that's Maria singing the harmony. But yeah, it just felt like there's a very visceral kind of pain in that song. So to have the loud drums and be able to scream over it, I think felt like the right thing.
Well, let the poets cry themselves to sleep, and all their tearful words would turn back into steam. But me, I'm a single cell on a serpent's tongue. There's a muddy field where a garden was, and I'm glad you got away, but I'm still stuck out here. My clothes are soaking wet from your brother's tears.
We still play this one live, kind of, a bit. Conor's changed the lyrics again, as he has for most of these songs, just ever so slightly, just tweaks, just to kind of make them more relevant to our current lives. But like, it still conjures a lot of memories or something. It's like, because it's a lot of wistful imagery, I think, and it still kind of resonates with me. And in thinking about like past events and, our lives and so forth, it still holds some emotional weight for at least me when we play it live.
I definitely remember when we would play shows in Omaha, sometimes I felt a little strange singing around like my family and stuff. But I think if you want to be an artist or a writer of some worth, I think you have to be willing to, to show the underbelly of your experience and your psyche. And it's not always I try to do the names have been changed to protect the innocent kind of thing, but sometimes it's more evident than others in different songs. But I mean, so like you said, to a listener, no one's gonna know, not no one, but most people that hear the song aren't gonna be aware of all of that. So that's another thing, is you have to make it can't be so specific and personal that I guess it can be, but I try to make my songs, even if they are explicit from my experience, I try to put some universality into it so that like a guy like you can hear a song and feel connected to it, even though you might not know the actual character people that make it up, populate it.
You're the yellow bird that I've been waiting for. The end of paralysis. I was a statuette. Now I'm drunk as hell on a piano bench, and when I press the keys, it all gets reversed. The sound of loneliness makes me happier.
Being drunk as hell on a piano bench, the sound of loneliness makes you happier. It's not necessarily a cheerful song, but it's a mechanism for healing, as well. And I guess I feel that in the song.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the subtext of a lot of, I guess I'd consider early Bright Eyes music then, and maybe still to this day to some degree, although like I said, I think I've lost maybe a little bit of my, I don't know, belief system has changed and crumbled and rebuilt over the years. But I think music as salvation was a big kind of theme for me for those first several Bright Eyes records, like the idea that like there's all this pain and all this misery everywhere that you can observe, and whether it's your own or just empathy for other people. But, somehow the act of music and the community that it brings together, and playing music with your friends, or just sort of fighting back against the negativity and sadness with, creativity and coming together and making, a joyful noise, as they say.
We ripped off, what is it, Beethoven? I don't know, Ode to Joy. And that one was fun because, I mean, again, it's a long one with a lot of verses. And, the shape of that one, was, we always kind of wanted it sort of like this building or this tension or this, that's why it's just mostly like a dum, dum, dum. And it's just kind of a chaotic, frenetic ending that's kind of explosive. It's more, I feel like as we've performed it live, kind of have created a more effective version of that song, but we did what we could in the moment. But it was, just a lot of suspense in that song that I think that, musically speaking, we're trying to create. Obviously, ripping off Ode to Joy.
Well, again, a sort of musical joke. As a rule, I hate puns, but that is, and maybe that's the only song I've titled a pun. I don't know. But, it's, whatever. It's a bit cheeky, taking the Ode to Joy and then, turning it into sort of a, punk folk type of anthem.
The sun came up with no conclusions. Flowers sleeping in their beds. The city cemetery's humming. I'm wide awake, it's morning. I have my drugs, I have my woman. They keep away my loneliness. My parents, they have their religion, but sleep in separate houses.
It delves into political topics or some kind of personal stuff. I think that one was always slated to be the last song on the record, and it kind of came together pretty easily. It was nice, when Walcott was in town, because he recorded some for Wide Awake and also Digital Ash when he came into Lincoln to record, and having, I don't know, little elements like the vibraphone and the trumpet. There's just little bells and whistles, almost literally, that on that song kind of gave it a little playful color, even though it's kind of dark in a way.
I like it that it's at the end of the record because it does feel like it sort of revisits all the themes kind of, but in a concise, again, like the defiance is there, kind of getting up to face the day in the morning, or maybe been up all night and the sun's coming up, and you have some kind of fighting spirit, I suppose. It's maybe where that comes from, and the idea that obviously like you want to reach happiness, but it's a long road.
I read the body count out of the paper, and now it's written all over my face. No one ever plans to sleep out in the gutter. Sometimes that's just the most comfortable place. So I'm drinking, breathing, writing, singing. Every day I'm on the clock. My mind races with all my longings, but can't keep up with what I got.
There isn't a ton of change or movement in it. Well, that's not true. There's this growth and this resetting and this kind of tension that kind of builds throughout the song and kind of pairs itself down a little bit throughout the song and kind of comes back. It's just kind of, I don't know, an uneasy kind of tension throughout that song. And it's a very cathartic thing to play. Like when it felt like that when we recorded it, And it feels like that still today, 20 years later, it still works. And that's kind of an impressive thing. That's maybe why we drag it out a little too long live. I think there was some like 12 or 15-minute version that we played somewhere. Even I was kind of getting like, okay, we should wrap this up. Like, but mellow noise sections and then big, like the loud part at the end just going on and on. But it's always a lot of fun to play. We tend to play that one towards the end of the set too, as a point of excitement for us, I guess. But yeah, that's its nature. It's kind of a tension building or shape-shifting tension throughout the verses and choruses that lead up to that kind of just fucking it up.
Well, I could have been a famous singer if I had someone else's voice, but failures always sounded better. Let's fuck it up, boys. Make some noise!
Well, I think that especially up to that point, I had been, told over and over again, or anytime someone would write about our records or shows or whatever, there was always some kind of comment about my voice being poor, or why, like it sounds like a dying fucking animal or something, some kind of, it's an acquired taste. And so again, it's like a half joke kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. That's where that line sort of came from. And, we always have maintained a sort of fuck you kind of stance about like, if you don't like what we do, it's really okay. We're going to just do it anyway, So I think there's still had a little bit of that punk rock thing going on that we grew up on.
Make some noise. And we still kind of live by that same, with that same feeling and ethos, I suppose. When mixing it, I was a little nervous about the end result, even though it was kind of what exactly we set out to do, which was make a spare kind of folk record along the lines of like, Jackson Browne or Neil Young records from the 70s that were kind of straightforward and kind of simple. I felt a little nervous. Like, are Bright Eyes fans going to like this? The songs I feel like are really good. Production-wise, it's a bit different than what, Lifted or Fevers and Mirrors or even Letting Off the Hat. The records that we'd put out prior to that had a lot more tricks and stuff to it and sonic exploration, meaning like a little bit more experimental things with sounds or arrangements. This one we didn't do, and so I felt a little nervous about how it would be received. And also, if I did my job, or if I kind of phoned it in by just being like, I'm not going to play on this one. It doesn't need it. I'm not going to play on this one either. It doesn't need it. I'm not going to play on this one. It doesn't need it. So, like, I felt a little nervous that I didn't do enough. The more that, Conor and his voice are featured and not having them being unencumbered by a bunch of notes and counter melodies and so forth, like it just felt right to me. So I was hoping that people would respond to that. I remember sending it to Jenny Lewis because we're still friends, but we were closer friends back then, and because I wanted her opinion because I was a little nervous. So I was like, what do you think of this? Is this like too spare? She's like, oh my God, this is the best thing you guys have ever. She's like, this is like one of the best records I've ever heard. And she's our friend, so I was just like, well, she's just being our friend. But I really do trust and respect her opinion on matters of music, because at the time I was, doing records with Rilo Kiley, and her solo record, Rabbit for a Coat, was around that same time. I remember it was when we toured this record, we were actually working on that in the bus, the Rabbit for a Coat record. Anyways, we're friends, and so like, just wanted to get her feel on it, and that made me feel better.
Again, I do remember the sort of surprise of how well it was received. And then, like I said, the Digital Ash and Digital Urn, I think it gave people because I think our band is somewhat polarizing. So it gave people like a license to be like, since we put out the 2 records, they could still talk shit. And they're like, oh, they made this terrible record, but they made this great record. So it was like, it let people off the hook. They could like our band because we put out what they perceived as like a shitty record at the same day, like Digital Ash. But nowadays, like people come up to me and tell me how much they love Digital Ash, and so it's kind of hilarious. But there was a very tough time where like we went on the whole Wide Awake tour, which I don't know why we did this. We should have just played all the songs at the same shows, but in our mind, we're like, let's do the Wide Awake tour, and then it's like a way different band and equipment. So then we did Digital Ash, but playing like a lot of the same cities within the same year. So it's like you go to wherever on the Wide Awake tour, it's like, like kind of miniature Beatles mania, and then come back and we're like all in black and like the Faints, the rest of our band, and it's like very cold and strange and lights going off everywhere, and people didn't know what to make of it. They thought they were coming to hear First Day of My Life, and a lot of them left very upset, but so goes.
The sun came up with no conclusions. Flowers sleeping in their beds. The city summer dailies humming. I'm wide awake, it's morning.
After it came out, again, things got very different as far as whatever success and celebrity and that kind of thing. I mean, one thing I will say that always kind of worked in our favor, our band kept every time we had, and because we had our own record label, so we were also like doing all this work that I think if a band's just signed to the label isn't aware of. But all the bands that were part of our circle in Omaha and then eventually widened, you know, everyone was getting more successful, and it seemed like as each year passed, each new record we put out, the goalposts would move a little bit. And so we had time to I had time to sort of realize what was happening to a degree, but I still wasn't really prepared for when Wide Awake came out. It's just things were a lot different. And I remember the tour for the album, it was like, I don't know, felt like the Beatles or something. I walk on stage, I was just like, flash, 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 flash. Like so many, I feel like that was still people that had cameras. People were still flashing cameras at you, and, you know, it was back when there was money in the music industry. So like doing weird photo shoots with like 20 people working on them and all kinds of things that I don't know how much like exists really for like a band our size anymore, just because you know how it is. Everything's changed kind of with the music business. But yeah, it was a sort of surreal little period of my life.
It was a good moment in time, like the confluence of events of Conor moving out to New York City and having all these kind of inspiring new surroundings and environment and new people, and the excitement in the place itself, the city, and songs that came out of as a result out of that inspiration and kind of creative like burst. Like it just felt like special to me. And so I'm not surprised. I wish that some of our more modern songs would be played as much, but like we'll see, maybe. But we have many records to make in the future, so we'll see. Well, hopefully we have many records to make in the future. But no, I'm proud of the fact that if you go to Apple Music or Spotify's Wide Awake This Morning, Wide Awake This Morning, Wide Awake This Morning, Wide Awake This Morning, Wide Awake This, and then one from Lifted, or like Lover I Don't Have to Love, or something like that. Then Wide Awake This Morning, Wide Awake This Morning, you know, it's just our old shit. But like, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm proud to have been a part of it, you know.
I'm Wide Awake This Morning is, I would say, far and away our biggest commercial success as a band. But to me, it's always felt like a slightly like small in scope because of the instrumentation and the idea that we were kind of going for a purist sort of 70s folk rock sound. And it's just a reminder of that time in my life, which is very transformative period for me.
Yeah, like looking back on I'm Wide Awake This Morning, it's been so long. It's been over 20 years since we made it, and details in my memory is a little fuzzy, but I have just distinct pictures in my mind and moments in my mind that'll stick with me forever. And when I go back and listen to it today, they pop up, and it's like just the camaraderie and friendship, and just because the only people that played on it were our friends, like, there was an excitement that I felt then, because I was really, I mean, when Conor would show me some of these songs, I would be like, oh my God, like it just felt like he just stepped up songwriting, even though I've since he was a little kid, I was like, this kid writes some fucking great songs, like when he was 14 years old, 13, 14, and this just felt like an elevated, he just stepped his game up, and I felt really excited about it. And when I go back and listen to the songs today, I still feel that, I think of Conor as one of the best, like, kind of living songwriters going right now. And I'm not saying that because I'm in the band or he's, my friend. It's just what I feel, and, and we're obviously still a band. We're still making records. But when I go back and listen to Wide Awake, I get reminded of, like, wow, not only have we been doing this a while, but we've been doing it for a while at a very kind of high level. And most of it's due to Conor. But like, it just makes me just happy to be a part of this band and project for so long with Conor, who's, one of my best friends. We live next door to each other. I see him, he's just up here last night hanging out with Maria in the studio. And it's just, our lives are so kind of intertwined, and our fates and fortunes are just so entwined with each other. And I just feel happy to be a part of it,
Visit lifeoftherecord.com for more information about Bright Eyes. You'll also find a full transcript of this episode and a link to purchase I'm Wide Awake This Morning. Instrumental music by Cheyenne Metters. Thanks for listening.